Hello everyone, this is Major Green, also known as Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to review the movie From Beyond, 1986, which I just watched for the first time and I absolutely loved it. This is one of those gems which somehow I missed in the past. I wish I would have seen this movie as a kid. I used to love movies like this, all these science fiction horror movies with all the gory special effects and all that stuff. And as a kid, it's much more impactful. So as an adult, you kind of see through all the special effects. So it doesn't really scare you. It's not really scary, but it's really entertaining, and you can even see it as a comedy. So this is one of those great B movies, science fiction horror, and Jeffrey Combs plays the main hero. And he always used to play in movies like that, like Re-Animator, which was also by the same director, I think. Same guy wrote and directed it. And it looks great, not perfect. Sometimes the special effects are very obvious a lot of times, but sometimes they look much better than even today's special effects. Even today's CGI doesn't look as real as some of the stuff they used, and that's because they actually used real puppets, real makeup, real practical special effects. So it looks real because it is real. It was actually there. And so it's great. So I love this kind of stuff. I can't believe I missed this movie and only now I found it, but I'm glad I did. Once in a while I find these old gems, and they just don't make movies like this anymore. I don't think we will ever see such movies again. Nowadays everything is with CGI and it looks kind of fake. And even though these old practical special effects, they do have a lot of flaws, so you can tell it's fake a lot of times, but it also have like a special kind of charm to it. It's almost nostalgic, because these are the sort of movies we watched as kids, and so it has its own charm. Like, I love these kinds of movies. As a kid, one of the first ones I saw was The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. I saw it at about age 7, I think. It was way too early for that, and it absolutely amazed and horrified me. I probably saw it earlier than I should have, but as a kid it's even better. As a kid it actually scares you, so I'm glad I did see that. Also movies like Alien and The Thing. I always loved movies like that, especially if they have a science fiction element and not just fantasy, not just zombies and magic and stuff like that. I always prefer science fiction to fantasy, because it makes it kind of more plausible, and also the science fiction part itself is always interesting. And so I always loved the science fiction horror movies, whereas alien movies, all that kind of stuff was always a lot of fun. So I would add this one to the collection of my all-time favorite science fiction horror movies. And I think this movie actually inspired a whole bunch of other movies which came later, such as Slither had a very similar kind of monster. The guy who has his half face turning into a monster, and he wants to unite with everyone, to fuse itself with everybody into one organism, stuff like that. Also, this movie inspired a whole bunch of Star Trek and Stargate episodes, and not just in the ideas, but also in some of the visuals. They even kind of copied some of the visual style of this movie, I think. I don't think it was a coincidence. Ideas and visuals. Let me explain the story. So basically, there's a scientist who invents this machine which creates some kind of field in which you can see all kinds of life forms that exist in another dimension, which kind of coexist with us, but we never see them. They go through us, but when you activate this device, you are able to see these creatures. So we saw the same exact idea in a few episodes of Star Trek. For example, in the TNG episode Phantasms, we saw kind of leeches living off people without them even knowing it, because they're kind of out of phase from everything. And as you see in this movie, some of these creatures look kind of like snakes floating around. And we saw a similar kind of visuals in the episode Realm of Fear, in which Lieutenant Barclay, who was terrified from being transported, went through the transporter, and he saw all those worms kind of flying around him, and one of them touched his arm, and it caused him some side effects, and no one believed him at first that he actually saw those creatures in the transporter beam. And so we have the same kind of setup in this movie. Basically, this scientist guy sees all these snakes, and later on no one believes him. They put him in a mental institute because they think he's crazy that he saw all those creatures. So that's kind of similar to that episode with Lieutenant Barclay. And by the way, the device itself, it actually kind of looks like the Iconian device in season 2 of Star Trek TNG, in the episode Contagion. They had the same kind of spherical device, which also kind of shoots lightning and opens up doorways to other places. So it's not directly a copy, but it's kind of similar. And in Stargate we also saw an episode called Sight Unseen, in which they bring a device from another planet, and then it causes some people to see all kinds of creatures which apparently fly through walls as if they're not there. I think Jonas was the first one to see it, and then again, no one believed him. They thought he's crazy. And then other people started seeing those creatures, which kind of exist in the same space, but we don't normally see them because they're kind of out of phase, but this device makes them visible. So this is the same exact idea, and it was lifted from this movie. And also in the movie, the device causes some kind of reaction in the brain of the people near it, and then they kind of become addicted to it. They have to keep coming to it all the time, and that reminds me of a different Stargate episode called The Light, in which they discovered the device on some alien planet which is generating these purple lights, and then anyone who looks at them kind of becomes mesmerized and kind of unable to leave it, becomes addicted to it. And so also we had the same kind of idea in this movie as well. So all these guys kind of become addicted to this device to see the other dimension, and it also causes them to start mutating and stuff and to become different creatures. And that kind of reminded me of the movie The Thing, which did come before. So I guess this movie from Beyond kind of ripped off The Thing, because we had the same kind of creature which can change shapes, constantly morph into different kinds of creatures, and also anyone that he eats, he becomes that person before starting mutating again. So this is very similar to the movie The Thing. And also there was a Star Trek episode which also kind of ripped it off. In the episode Aquiel, we also had the same kind of creature, which they call the coalescent organism, which whoever it eats, it becomes that person before starting mutating to a monster again. So they kind of borrowed that also from The Thing. And by the way, in a Deep Space Nine episode, which also ripped off the movie The Thing, it was the episode The Adversary in season 3, in which someone on the ship turned out to be a shapeshifter, and he constantly pretended to be someone in the crew, and they had no idea who it was, and they tried to use a blood test to figure out who was the changeling, and the changeling fooled them and constantly tried to sabotage the ship, and there was that kind of sense of paranoia between all the characters and so on. So that whole episode was inspired by the movie The Thing, which at the time I didn't know. When I watched that Deep Space Nine episode, and I loved it, and I thought, what a brilliant episode, what an original idea. And only later I saw the movie The Thing, and I figured out, wait, so that episode was a ripoff from this movie. So Star Trek and Stargate always kind of ripped off older movies. At least Stargate kind of admitted that. Stargate often made kind of deliberate references, deliberate homages to those movies that they were ripping off. But Star Trek just kind of ripped it off quietly without admitting it. So anyway, so back to this movie. So as I said, so this movie inspired a whole bunch of all these episodes, maybe in other TV series as well. I didn't watch every science fiction series in existence, so I don't know, maybe there were many others which also took ideas from this, but I know very well Star Trek, and I know Stargate, so I immediately recognized all those elements from all those episodes. And also the more recent movie Slither also had a kind of a similar kind of creature. And I always love this idea. I always love this idea of an organism which tries to unite with all other organisms, kind of like the Zerg in StarCraft, or the Master of the Mutants in Fallout 2. And if you remember, I made a video about Prometheus. I complained how they ruined the space jockey from the backstory of Alien, because I always wanted that to be also the same kind of body horror, cybernetic, super advanced organism slash machine, which wants to unite with everybody. So I wished the space jockey would have been some kind of cyborg grown out of the ship, and the ship itself should have been organic. And that's exactly what that artist H.R. Giger actually painted. If you look at his original drawings and stuff, that's the type of stuff he was always painting. All kinds of mixes between people and machines, kind of everybody blending together, stuff like that, kind of crazy stuff. Very artistic, very creative. And so I was really disappointed by Prometheus, which didn't exploit that idea. They went into a different direction and totally destroyed that idea, and so that's why I hated Prometheus. And there are so few movies that actually play with this idea. Recently I mentioned the movie Society, which also had a bunch of creatures kind of merging with each other and stuff like that. Kind of, I love this kind of body horror movie, and I love this old style special effects, all that old kind of makeup with puppets, with stop motion animation, all that kind of stuff. They don't do this anymore. So this movie was a total gem with all of those things. They did it well, not perfect. There were a few scenes which were laughable, a few of the special effects were very obvious, so much so that it's laughable. But then if you laugh at it, it's also fun. It's kind of like a comedy almost. So anyway, so this was a great find. I really loved this movie. And so that's why I made this review, and also because I wanted to point out all these similarities with Star Trek and Stargate and probably a whole bunch of other shows and movies. And the movie also had great actors, everybody were good in this movie, and Jeffrey Combs is awesome as always, and all the other ones as well. And that female in the movie, I forgot her name, but she had some sexy scene in this movie, which I probably shouldn't show you because I might get a strike. But there were some awesome scenes with that. All the characters were really well done, and there's a bunch of scenes in the mental institution, and it had a kind of evil nurse there, and all those elements which we are familiar with in a lot of other movies, and it was really great here. There was even a scene which was very similar to Silence of the Lambs, when that female psychiatrist first goes into that mental institution. She kind of looks at all the doors and she sees all kinds of crazy people, and in one of them the guy kind of masturbates, and that really reminds me of the scene in Silence of the Lambs, which did come out later than this movie. So maybe that was also inspired from this movie, because the scene was very, very similar, same kind of stuff. So as I said, this movie I think inspired a whole bunch of other things. So a lot of things I thought were original actually were not. Actually this movie was the originator, so I give it points for that as well, for originality. And I wish that we had more movies like this made. Really great stuff, a lot of interesting science fiction ideas, a lot of very cool special effects, a lot of body horror, a lot of bloody gory scenes, mostly well done. And today everything is CGI, so it's really nice to see a movie like this which was made completely with practical special effects, and it has its own charm, and it's really great in my opinion. So I think I'm repeating myself now, so if you didn't see it, I highly recommend this movie if you like these types of movies, science fiction horror. So that's all I wanted to say about it today, so let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.